Hello, everyone, and welcome to Movie Goodness, where we examine life through cinema here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and I am super excited about what we're about to get in theaters on July the 31st, and that is Spider-Man Brand New Day. I am a self-proclaimed biggest, giant, largest, whatever adjective you want to add to it, Batman fan. And I know that throws a lot of people off because that's not what we're talking about today. But I want to give you a little backstory about me and where we are going with this show today. Batman is my all-time favorite comic book character, hands down, period, end of story. And if you know me personally, if you've been around me, you know there's no doubt about that. I have nothing but Batman memorabilia around my office, in my house, at work. In my office at work, I have Batman stuff. I'm a Batman guy. My wallpaper on my phone is Batman. But coming in at a close second, and I mean a very close second, is Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man. He, as far as Marvel is concerned, he's my favorite. That's not even close. Love Spider-Man, whether it's Peter Parker or Miles Morales. Spider-Man is my guy. But Batman is he's just ultimate cool to me. But if you want to get outside of that, if you want to just strip away the Batman in me, which is virtually impossible, I love Spider-Man. And I've loved every iteration of Spider-Man on the big screen. Whether it was Tobey Maguire back in the early 2000s, whether it was Andrew Garfield's The Amazing Spider-Man films, I make an argument that those were awesome, even though I know it's diverse, especially part 2, which pretty much killed that franchise. But I can find an argument to say that was a really good movie. But when we get into the MCU, and when the MCU finally got their hands on Spider-Man proper, it really took off. It really became something that I remember reading from the comics, that I enjoyed in the comic books and in the animated shows that from the 90s. I really loved it, and what made me love it so much was Tom Holland. Tom Holland was probably the most perfect casting of this character that we have been fortunate enough to get in 3 versions of this character, and that's no shade on Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield, because I like them as Peter Parker. Tobey is great for that version of Spider-Man. Andrew Garfield was great for that version of Spider-Man. But for the MCU and what all took place just outside of his own individual films, whether it's Homecoming, Far From Home, No Way Home, when you stick him in Captain America, Civil War, he was great in that. He was great in the Avengers films. He just fit in like a glove. I couldn't say that about Tobey Maguire. I couldn't say that about Andrew Garfield's portrayal of Peter Parker. Even though they were great, I can't see them in the MCU, Now, could it have worked? Sure. They could have found a way to make it work. But when they cast Tom Holland in this role, and they really went back to high school and really went to a teenage Peter Parker, the one that we all grew up on, the one, at least those of us who are of a certain age and followed this character for so long, that character, young, very young. And you go back to the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire was, he was almost 30. he was well in his 20s playing this high schooler. You have Andrew Garfield. Andrew Garfield looked about 30 something when he was portraying Peter Parker. But I mean, you have to suspend disbelief in a lot of things and just roll with it. and just go with the performances. And the performances were great. You know, I believed through their performance that they were high schoolers, but when visually, not so much. But when it comes to Tom Holland as Peter Parker, he still look like a high schooler. He still looks like a teenager to this day. I mean, he just has that look. And that's why the perfect casting took place with Tom Holland. And we're approaching this new addition to the franchise with Spider-Man Brand New Day, which looks amazing. I hope and pray and wish that it doesn't let me down or let everybody else down, because we got 3 bangers out of this franchise so far in the MCU, and that's not normal when it comes to Spider-Man films. Just look at Sony and their take on the other Spider-Man adjacent characters, whether it's Madam Web, Morbius, Kraven the Hunter, and Venom. Crash and burn. All of them crashed and burned. And Sony has not made a good Spider-Man film in years, aside from the Miles Morales animated Spider-Man films. Those are great. Those are even better than the MCU Spider-Man films. I love the Spider-Verse films. But today we're going to talk about the MCU Spider-Man, the Tom Holland version of Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, and go over the previous 3 films that he starred in this franchise, all directed by John Watts. Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man Far From Home, and Spider-Man No Way Home. And it's weird that we're getting another Spider-Man film in this universe that doesn't have home in the title. We're finally getting a Spider-Man film that's outside of the home franchise, and this new one will be directed by Dustin Daniel Cretton, who gave us Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Loved that addition to the MCU. That was one of my favorite films in Phase 4, I think it was, after Endgame and everything. The only one that truly worked. So I really enjoyed that. And seeing what we've gotten so far through the trailers and everything, his take on this Spider-Man, it looks very different from what we got with John Watts Spider-Man. You know, we're going in a more mature direction, being as though this is an older Peter Parker. He's been through much more as a character, you know, coming up through high school, fighting the Vulture and whatnot, helping out the Avengers, becoming an Avenger, going out in space and fighting aliens, and being blipped, and coming back, and, you know, having the world forget who he is, losing Aunt May, and losing the love of his life, his best friend. So we got a different Spider-Man. So it requires a different tone than what we received in those first 3 films. And I am so excited to see what direction they are going in. But let's first jump into our recaps and somewhat of a review, because I don't think I actually, other than when they came out, really gave a heartfelt review of those 3 Spider-Man films. And so I'm going to do it today and get us hyped up for Spider-Man Brand New Day. But how all this came to be was, we all knew, well, if you didn't know, Spider-Man wasn't a part of Marvel, because when Marvel was going through their bankruptcy phase, they started selling off their characters, at least the licensing of their characters, to save their comic book business, you know, their studio as a whole. And once the MCU or Marvel Studios came to be, they really didn't have many characters to pull off of, because they sold the rights to so many. Spider-Man was at Sony. The Hulk was at Universal. I think it still is at Universal. The X-Men and Fantastic Four, they were at 20th Century Fox. And so on and so forth. So they didn't have their main players in their bag. So that's why we got started with an Iron Man and a Thor and Captain America and Black Widow, and that's how all that came to be. And we enjoyed those kind of B level, and I say that kind of tentatively because they're not B level now, but they were at the time. You know, they're so popular now. You can't imagine this universe without an Iron Man and all this. But Iron Man was not a main guy in the comics. You know, it wasn't until these movies came out that Iron Man became Iron Man, and that's through Robert Downey Jr.'s amazing performance as Tony Stark. But as I said, Sony owned the rights to Spider-Man and still do to this day. The reason that Marvel is a part of this is because they're sharing the Spider-Man licensing at this point, and that's due to the fact that it was a lot of intangibles that took place in order for this to happen. Because Sony is not letting go of Spider-Man for no reason whatsoever, because Sony has nothing else. They really, as far as IP is concerned, Sony don't have anything to kind of build off of other than Spider-Man. And so they're not letting that go. But at the time, it was just perfect timing in regards to Marvel Studios, because you had the Sony hacks that took place, those emails that that got hacked rather, and the studio was in disarray, and people weren't receiving the amazing Spider-Man films that we were getting with Andrew Garfield, and the box office wasn't as satisfying, and they had no direction to go with it. And hey, what else to do at this point but to holla at Kevin Feige? And so they got together. They kind of banged out a plan, what direction they wanted to go with it, how they were going to split the revenues, and so on and so forth. And lo and behold, it all came together right before Captain America Civil War came out. Actually, during the filming, because they started filming Captain America Civil War, and Spider-Man was not in their grasp. They didn't have that locked down. And so that movie would have went on. I think the plan was, it was mainly going to be, you know, with Black Panther being introduced in that film, and that was going to be the real catalyst of that movie. But they kind of left a window open in the event that the deal does come through, and the deal did go through, and that's when the search was on for the MCU's Peter Parker. A lot of names were thrown out there, and it all came down to just a couple. And Tom Holland was the one to emerge victorious in that search. I seen Tom Holland, and this is crazy because I thought it was weird that they cast him, and that was only because I had just saw The Impossible, and I think that was like his first film. And in my mind, I thought The Impossible was filmed like a year before or something like that. It took me a while to watch that movie, but so, and he was a little kid. I mean, I'm talking preteen. He was so small, and when they announced him, I was like, wait, how young is Peter Parker going to be? And finally I saw some footage of him, and I was like, oh, okay, so that's right. Yeah, The Impossible came out like 5-6 years ago. So I'm tripping for nothing. And I'm like, okay, he looks young. He looks really, really young. And at the time he was young. And so it fits, you know, if we're going down that road of him being in high school and we're starting from jump, you know, starting from scratch and going forward with it. All right, I'm all on board with it. His opening, or introduction, I should say, as Peter Parker in the MCU in that film, in Captain America Civil War, erased any doubt that anyone could have had about him being Peter Parker. he nailed it. And he wasn't in the movie long. He only had what, three scenes? No, two, maybe two or three scenes in that film, and that's all I needed to see. I felt at that point we were in great hands. This is the Peter Parker I've been waiting to see my entire life in live action on the big screen. And he nailed it. So we move on to the year 2017 when we received his first solo film, and it was Spider-Man Homecoming. This movie was directed by John Watts. He directed all three of these movies that we're going to talk about. But John Watts is coming off of Cop Car, a film that I had just watched when they said that he was going to direct this film. Completely different movie from what we're getting in this comic book superhero world. But I enjoyed Cop Car. I think Kevin Bacon was in that movie. He played the little dirty cop in that film where kids stole this cop car or whatever. And really good movie. And so I was interested to see what was his vision. What is the MCU? Who had made Iron Man a household name, who had made the Avengers work, brought it together, who made Thor an interesting character for all to enjoy. You know, all that they have been doing up to this point have been home runs. You know, it wasn't until after Endgame they really started to drop the ball, but before that, it was money. Whatever Kevin Feige touched, it was gold up to this point. So the excitement level surrounding this film, all they had to do is not mess it up. Starting along with Tom Holland as Peter Parker, you had Michael Keaton. Yes, Batman Michael Keaton. he made his villainous turn in the MCU, playing the Vulture in this film. You also had Zendaya, Donald Glover, Jacob Batalon, Melissa Tomei, and you also had Robbie. His friends called him Robbie. Robert Downey Jr. Reprising his role as Iron Man, Tony Stark, if you will. And in the film, Peter Parker, he's trying to balance high school life with being a hero after facing the Vulture. What made Spider-Man Homecoming work so well was the fact that they can incorporate the MCU, continue the MCU story, but it felt like a Spider-Man movie. You know, the problem with some of Marvel's movies, you know, they just shoehorn in characters to set up other other films down the line. And you kind of lose touch of what the movie is. Let me give you a prime example. Just recently with Captain America Brave New World, that felt nothing like a Captain America movie. Not because it wasn't Steve Rogers. It didn't feel like a Captain America movie because it felt like a Hulk sequel. It felt like The Incredible Hulk 2 because you have Thunderbolt Ross becoming the Red Hulk. You had the leader, who was from The Incredible Hulk. You had Betty Ross pop up in a cameo from The Incredible Hulk. All of it was a continuation of everything that happened in The Incredible Hulk. Nothing surrounding Captain America, which ruined the movie. The movie was just horrible. It was bad. That was just a bad movie because there was so much to play with there. You have Falcon taking over the reins as Captain America, a black man. You could really play into that, lean into that. You know, oh, there's people who don't want him. Oh, that's not my Captain America. You know, you could have really dove into that. Dive into the fact that he isn't a super soldier. He's just a regular guy like you and me. And he is Captain America. Lean into that. That movie did none of that. That movie had none of that. That would have made it more compelling and interesting. He was basically a background player, which He is in every other movie anyway. And so it was just a continuation of that. And the movie bombed. Spider-Man didn't do that. Spider-Man felt like a Spider-Man movie. Even though initially I was kind of upset. I'm like, why is Spider-Man getting this movie and we got to have Iron Man in it? You know, this isn't Iron Man. I want to see Spider-Man. The first time I watched it, I didn't. It's not that I didn't like it. I loved the movie. I always did love the movie, but I was just frustrated with the fact, why can't Tom get his own movie? And I kind of felt like that with all three of the movies until I rewatched it for this show, to be honest with you, just recently. And I said, nah, I don't feel that way no more, you know? But the feeling I had was just for, you know, this movie, you had Iron Man in it. And Far From Home, you had Nick Fury. Well, who we thought was Nick Fury in that movie. And then in the third film, they sauced it up and put every Spider-Man that we ever had in it. You know, it never was just a Tom Holland film. And, you know, gave him his own movie. But when you really sit back, well, I had to. I'm pretty sure all of you are smarter than me. So you probably never did feel that way. You probably did feel like, oh, this is Tom Holland's story. This is him doing his thing throughout. But I didn't feel that way until I rewatched it. But Homecoming was so much of his, it was an origin without being an origin. You know, we didn't have to see Uncle Ben die. Actually, Uncle Ben, I don't even think Uncle Ben exists in this universe. He's never mentioned or anything. But you didn't need him. It just goes to show you ain't even need Uncle Ben to make the Spider-Man story work. My takeaways from Homecoming, Michael Keaton as the Vulture, in one scene in particular, and I think we all know what scene that is, when Tom Holland or Peter Parker goes to pick up his girlfriend for the prom, for the dance or whatever it is. I guess it was the prom. And he answers the door. Well, Michael Keaton answers the door in Tom Holland's face. And at this moment, I knew that Tom Holland was much more than just Peter Parker. You know, he was much more than Spider-Man. Tom Holland is an actor. Tom Holland is so much bigger than what this character truly is. His reaction throughout that scene was so awesome because he could have easily exposed him for who he was in front of his family and, you know, take him to justice and all this here. No. No, he didn't do. He had to swap because that would have exposed him as Spider-Man. So he was in this little vortex of, man, what should I do? It was a mixture of fear and I gotta do something. And how did I get put in this situation? All these emotions were on Tom Holland's face throughout that scene. And then in the car when the Vulture or Toomes, he figured it out. He figured it out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And that scene, I mean, Michael Keaton, he's Michael Keaton, dog. He just, that was so perfect for him to intimidate Peter Parker like that. And Peter Parker as Spider-Man could rip him apart, but he was legit frightened. I was frightened for him in that. Perfect, man. That was a great scene. A great scene. I don't think any other Spider-Man film going forward had a scene that deep. We'll see going in this new one, but that was such a deep scene to me, and I was just super impressed with Tom Holland's performance just in that scene because you felt his dread, you know. And that's how when he pops up in other things, in these dramatic roles you see him in and whatnot, I believe it. I'm all in it. I know he can handle it because he did it in just a comic book movie, a movie that a lot of people just throw away, toss to the side like, oh, that's silly, that's for kids. No, no, it's not. Um, the other scene, the other takeaway I have is Peter Parker under the rubble. Now, this is straight out of the comics in this particular scene, but once again, Tom Holland's performance was amazing. Him pretty much about to accept defeat that he couldn't get from under that rubble at the end, and him pulling himself together to lift up all of that rubble, basically a building that's on top of him, and he lifted it up, was so powerful, man. It equals the scene, maybe even surpassed it, when Tobey Maguire stopped the not the freight train, but the subway train in Spider-Man 2, or I'm trying to think of something else in comparisons. When Superman stopped the plane in Superman Returns, the only good scene in that movie where Superman stops the plane from falling, that was another awesome scene. Or when Superman lifted up that I don't know, continent full of kryptonite, that was also powerful. But it's up there with that, in my humble opinion, because he had to dig deep to pick up that rubble, because he was just broken. And then the little kid in him came out, and he was, I can't do it, I can't do it. And for him to pull it together and remember who he is and lift up that building, unbelievable, man, unbelievable. But what I got out of this one that kind of went over my head the first viewing, even though I get it, I know what they were doing, but I kind of felt it here in my rewatch, was the fact that, yeah, I was upset that Iron Man's in it. He's helping him out, giving him these suits, he's just overpowered with those Iron Man suits, and at the end of this movie, he didn't have that. It was just him and his hoodie, his homemade little suit that he made. He didn't have the assistance of Tony Stark tech and all this other stuff. It was just him. And he pulled it off, and he was able to defeat the Vulture by the end of this movie. I loved it. Zendaya as MJ, a different MJ that we all are familiar with, no matter what iteration it is, in the comics or in the cartoon series or whatever. This was a very different MJ, and I loved it. I loved it. That's a character that could have been annoying, but it wasn't. She was not. Very funny. Very. You could tell the chemistry was there. That's why, it doesn't surprise anybody that those two are now currently married. I think it was confirmed that they're married. But either way, they're together. You could tell that they just had a certain chemistry on screen between Tom Holland and Zendaya, all starting back to this movie, and I just loved them bouncing off of one another. This was an awesome introduction into the MCU properly, not just a cameo in Captain America Civil War, but his own movie. And we get the introduction to Mac Gargan, who is the Scorpion in this movie, which plants the seed for this upcoming film, Brand New Day, where we actually going to get to see him as the Scorpion. So it all started here. And oh yeah, another takeaway I just thought about, another takeaway that I thought about the first time I watched it and this last time I watched it, was Spider-Man in the suburbs. What would you do? He doesn't have a building to swing, and for them to play that out where he has to chase behind the Vulture's crew, but he can't swing, so he has to run through these people's yards, the Ferris Bueller scene, and find a way to catch up with these guys without swinging on buildings, and his number one way of transportation. It was genius to me, because it's one of those things that you kind of think about when you was a kid reading the comics, but just in the back of your mind, like, what would he do if he didn't have the buildings to swing on? I always thought about that because I'm a weird one. And I finally get to see it on the big screen was somewhat exciting to me. And so, yeah, I loved Homecoming, a great introduction to this character, to the MCU, and promising greater things to come. And so we move on to 2019, and we get Spider-Man Far From Home. And of course, this all takes place after Avengers Endgame, when Tony Stark made the ultimate sacrifice and reversed the snap, and everybody came back from the blip and all this good stuff. And this was the very next film to pick up after the events of Endgame. And this movie had a lot of heavy lifting to do because you know, we're coming off of one of the most exciting and adrenaline filled, emotional MCU movies of all time. Well, two of them back to back with Infinity War and Endgame, you know? And so this is pretty much like the fresh start, the new era, or the new phase, or the new start of this different saga. Whereas the Infinity Saga is gone, now we into the multiverse saga, the very first film out of the gate. I'll say this: this was my least favorite of the three, and that's not to say I didn't enjoy it. It just taking Spider-Man out of New York City is like taking Batman out of Gotham to me. Yeah, will it work? Sure, you can make it work. They made this work, but it just didn't have the same charm and feel to it as you would with another Spider-Man film. You know, I'm not accustomed to seeing Spider-Man outside of New York. Not only outside of New York, but outside the United States, period. You know, he was in a completely different country altogether. And to be fair to the movie, it was weird to see him in outer space. You know, it was weird in the Avengers movies to see him outside of New York. It's just not that there's anything wrong with it or anything. I'm just accustomed to seeing him swinging in New York City. So this was a weird one to get involved with, and it was a weird movie altogether. You have Mysterio in this movie, who is portrayed by Jake Gyllenhaal, which oddly enough, he was the second runner-up to be Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire. Actually, more so, he was all in. He started getting fitted for his costume and everything for Spider-Man 2. He was going to replace Tobey Maguire. Tobey Maguire had hurt his back when he was, I think it was Seabiscuit. He had hurt his back between Spider-Man 1 and 2, and it was a little threat of he might not return for Spider-Man 2. So they went to Jake Gyllenhaal to reprise the role, which I was excited about because Jake Gyllenhaal, I'm a fan of pretty much everything he's in. Now, the movies, he maybe not so much, but I like him in every single thing he's in. I always pictured him as Batman, but we never got that. Everybody I picture as Batman. I'm gonna be fair. I just want people to be Batman. I just want to see Batman. But I can see him as Peter Parker, especially back then when he was a little younger, of course. And so he missed out on that. He didn't get the opportunity. Tobey Maguire came back and all this other good stuff. And he never got the opportunity to be in the Spider-Man movie or any superhero movie up to that point, as far as I'm can remember. So we come full circle. Now he's playing the villain in this latest addition to the Spider-Man universe. And reprising their roles, you also have Zendaya. Samuel Jackson is in it this time, as well as Kobe Smulders as Maria Hill. And this go around, Peter is recruited by Tony Stark and Mysterio to stop the Elementals while he is on a school trip to Europe. The Elementals were not exciting to me when they first announced this, even though we later find out it's a swerve, spoilers. I mean, if if you haven't seen these movies by now and been hearing me rattle on for 30 minutes about this, I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, it's spoilers. But anyway, yeah, I wasn't excited about the elementals because I read some issues in the comics with the elementals involving Spider-Man, and I just didn't feel that was the right direction to go cinematically. I know Mysterio was in the movie, and Mysterio has always been kind of a lower tier villain. Nobody, I would say, will be the main villain. Now, to be fair, so is Vulture. But Mysterio even lower than that. And I didn't think that he was going to be the main villain. But at the same time, you got to put two and two together. You're not going to cast Jake Gyllenhaal to be lesser than. So that part made a little sense that Mysterio was going to be the main villain here. So when the swerve happened, when you knew that the elementals were just an illusion conjured up by Mysterio, it all made sense. Like I said, this takes place after Endgame, and it was a lot of setup. We still have Peter Parker mourning the death of Tony Stark, his mentor, and there's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of trying to catch everybody up with the event of the blip, the return of everybody and how it's affecting the world. This film had the responsibility of doing that, of how people are responding, being gone for 7 years and popping back up. Life has changed. There's one character in here, the teacher, one of the teachers who he and this was funny, but it was sad at the same time. His wife left him during the blip, but because she faked that she got snapped, but she didn't really get snapped. She just felt that was her opportunity to leave, and he found out after he had a funeral and everything for the woman. I mean, but it was the saddest thing ever, but it was the funniest thing ever. But everybody is recovering from this. Some people are starting over from scratch. Some who didn't get blip are trying to readjust as well because they have been living their lives for 7 years without certain loved ones and friends and acquaintances. Now they're back. So now you got to kind of shift back to how you used to operate, and that's what made this movie a little more heavier because it wasn't, your typical Spider-Man out, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man saving the neighborhood and stuff like that. It had some heavy lifting to do MCU wise into explaining what this world has become since the blip, since Thanos, since the Avengers ended. And I think the movie did its best at it. This is the one out of all of these Spider-Man films that I didn't feel a connection to Peter here. Aside from him trying to get with MJ, it was nothing else Peter was really doing, because he's one of the ones who got snapped. He's one of the ones who disappeared. And so he has to kind of get back into the fold. But aside from that, this felt more of a Mysterio story than anything else. It didn't feel like a Peter Parker story. And now, with that being said, it's not bad. It's still good. It's still a good movie. It was put together well. With all things considered, it was funny. It had some awesome action sequences. The visuals were off the chain, and of course, the performance by Tom Holland in this movie, because, like I said, he had a lot on his shoulders here. Grieving the loss of Tony, grieving the fact that he wasn't around for 7 years, and now he feels he has to be the new Iron Man and taking on that responsibility, but that's not really what Tony wants from him. He didn't want him to be him. He wanted him to be better than him, so That was that whole weight, and then trusting Mysterio and putting his faith in him, only to find out that Mysterio is a criminal. He's a crook. Well, I ain't not a criminal per se, but just a con man who wants that technology that Tony left for him. And it was a really good, deep, dark performance. This was a pretty dark movie, not as dark as I think Brand New Day is going to be, but even as our next film we're going to talk about is. But this was kind of dark, with Peter and what he's going through, and how he adjusted to this new reality. And Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio was spot on great. I enjoyed him as this character. I thought he brought something a little more to it. It at times it felt a little over the top what he was doing, like he was in a different movie in certain scenes, but in scenes with him and Tom Holland, they really worked. They worked together. They were just chewing up the scenery, man. They really, you could tell they enjoy working together, because they, maybe I'm wrong, they probably hated each other off screen. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. Don't go say, oh, I heard that. No, I'm just playing. But they really bounced well off of one another, and it was scenes when it was Jake Gyllenhaal and his crew where it felt like he was a little over the top with it. He felt like cartoon mustache twirling villain type. But I mean, outside of that, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for what it was. By the end of this movie, we got a cameo in the post-credit scene or the mid-credit scene that was, I don't know, man. It just saved it for me. It went from being decent to great with that post-credit scene. Not because it was something substantial or important for the future of the MCU, just for nostalgia reasons alone. We got J.K. Simmons returning as J. Jonah Jameson in that mid-credit scene. And I honestly, at that moment, I realized, I mean, who else you going to get as J. Jonah Jameson? That is you want to talk about perfect casting? That is perfect casting. And that happened back in, 2000, 2001, whenever the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man came out. That was perfect. Nobody else can play this role. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm pretty sure there are actors out there. I can name a couple who can actually do good. And now it's going to make a lot of people mad when I drop these names, but I think they will be good J. Jonah Jamesons. Carmen Domingo. I think Carmen Domingo would be an awesome take on J. Jonah Jameson. I don't know why, but that name, it just sticks out to me. I would love to see that. The other name just popped out of my mind and I can't remember. If I do before it's over, I will mention it. But anyways, but besides that, man, J.K. Simmons is J. Jonah Jameson. He knows this character. He looks like he just leaped off the comic book pages as this character. The voice, the tone, the mannerisms, the look, everything worked. Even in this, when he didn't have the hair and he just had the George Jefferson hair with the bald spot at the top, he still worked as J. Jonah Jameson in this universe. Perfect casting. But I love the fact that they were able to get him back for that. We also got another post-credit scene when we find out that the Skrulls were actually infiltrating or pretending to be Nick Fury and Maria Hill throughout the movie. And when you watch it on a second viewing, you can pick it up by what they were saying throughout the film, like Maria calling Nick Fury Nick, and we know that nobody calls him Nick. Just little subtleties like that. Or when Nick tells Peter Parker about, your people on Earth or stuff like that. Just certain ways it was worded throughout the movie. When you watch it the first time, you'll never pick it up. But after you find out who they really are and then watch it again and listen to what they be saying, they tell you throughout the whole movie that they're not who they say they are. And I thought that was genius, actually. That just added to my excitement and my enjoyment of the film. And so yeah, Far From Home was a awesome addition, even though it's my least favorite, but it's still a very good Spider-Man film from Tom Holland and the MCU. And that leads us to our final film to recap, and that is the Avengers of of Spider-Man movies, and that is Spider-Man No Way Home. Let me first say, going to the theater and watching this, and this movie being the first movie that this came out after COVID, we're all recuperating from being locked up in our homes for a year and, not really going places, going to the theater to see movies. And I think at this point, when Spider-Man No Way Home came out, I think I've been to the movie twice, since the COVID outbreak had taken place. And, you had to mask up and sit, 3 rows away from people and stuff like that, to see a movie. And it wasn't maybe 10 people in the theater. So you didn't have the communal experience. It was really was a waste of money to go to the theaters around that time. And this was towards the end, of the real outbreak of it all. But this was the first time that after all of that pandemonium, that everybody can go to the theater and you can have a jam-packed theater. This was the most jam-packed theater since COVID. Now, I'm going to be fair. I'm going to be honest here. Scared to death. Sitting in the theater with all these people. We were still masked up. Everybody was still masked up at this point. But never been around so many people. I think the only other time, my daughter graduated high school the year before, oddly during the pandemic, 2020. And we were in this gymnasium and everybody was sitting in there and we all masked up. They were masked up, walking across the stage and everything. It was miserable. That was the most miserable graduation. And they put it together like months after, because they were supposed to graduate in May, but, that was at the height of everything. So I think it was maybe around August or September when they put a ceremony together for them. No, because she was in college by then. So it had to be July. It had to be July. But anyways, yeah, it was hot and we all in mass in this gymnasium. But anyways, that was the only other time that we were around a group of people, a large group of people during COVID. But as far as the theatrical experience is concerned, this was the first time. And yes, I was scared to death. But and everybody else was, because everybody was like, sitting on pins and needles, and but we wanted to see this movie because the rumors were swirling. The rumors were out there. Toby is gonna come back. They're gonna have Andrew Garfield in this film. It's gonna be bananas, man. Just wait. And I tried to avoid all those spoilers and everything, even though we went to see it opening day. All of those speculations and all that. I didn't want to hear it. I still, to this day, I don't want to hear nothing about Brand New Day, but I just stay away from all of that talk because I want to experience it firsthand. Being in that theater when the sling ring opened up, when Ned opened it up that first time, and it was Andrew Garfield first. And he went through and ripped off his mask, and it was Andrew Garfield. And everybody who were sitting on pins and needles barely wanted to breathe because we didn't want to breathe. Nobody else is there. We all just clapped it. Yes. It was great. And I'm like, that's all I wanted to see. And for them to do it again. He's opened it up again. And you see Tobey Maguire step out. And I'm like, oh my God, everybody just burst out in cheers. And you would have thought Jesus came back at that moment. I mean, it was pandemonium in that theater. And for the first time in over a year, since Endgame, that it was a release. It was like, forget about COVID. If I catch it, we're gonna catch it today because we're gonna be screaming and howling from this point on. And everybody was just so happy and so surprised. And even though the rumors were there, people speculated, but you didn't know for certain. And it was just such a joyous experience, man. I would never talk bad about this movie for that reason alone, because it saved me and many others from that COVID pandemic to really break free from being sheltered and, scared to be around others because of this sickness, this illness, that's going around. And that was the first time we were able to be free. You could tell everybody was able to be free. And it's all because of Spider-Man No Way Home. And look, I don't know why I went on that rant about this film, but I felt I needed to tell it. That this movie has a special place in my heart because of that. Even if you take that away, this movie was the best live action Spider-Man movie of all time. So far, the best. We'll see going forward. Unbelievable movie. Unfreaking believable. You have, coming back, of course, you have Zendaya. You have Doctor Strange, played by Benedict Cumberbatch in this film. You have William Dafoe returning as the Green Goblin. You have Jamie freaking Foxx returning as Electro. You have Alfred Molina returning as Doc Ock. It was so much going on in this movie. Peter asks Doctor Strange to use magic to make his identity as Spider-Man a secret again after it was revealed in Far From Home. And so when the spell goes wrong, due to Peter interfering with the spell, the multiverse is breaking open, and several visitors from other dimensions, or alternate realities, we should say, are brought into this universe with Peter Parker, and that's how we got Doc Ock and Electro and the Sandman and all this. Unbelievable. And the two Peters. Unbelievable how they made this work. It is amazing that they filmed this movie during COVID, so it was a lot of COVID restrictions that was going on during the filming of this movie. This movie showed me some things that I didn't think were possible in film, or things that I thought I would never see in my life. This goes back to Avengers Endgame. I never thought that I would see Peter Parker hitch a ride on Mjolnir, on Thor's hammer, catching a piggyback ride from Valkyrie, things like that. I never thought I'd get to see that. Never in my life did I think I was going to get to see 3 Spider-Men swinging around the Statue of Liberty, catapulting off of one another, doing their poses, their own individual poses on top of the Statue of Liberty. And it was just money. It was like the money shots of all money shots. But the money moment had to be, I don't care what you felt about the Amazing Spider-Man films or Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker. If you didn't get emotional when Andrew Garfield jumped after MJ fell and he yelled no and jumped down and caught her. If you didn't get emotional thinking back to the last time we saw Andrew Garfield as this character when he couldn't catch his MJ falling off the clock tower. And for that moment when Andrew Garfield in his just phenomenal acting ability to show that emotion on his face where he wanted to just cry, man, I'm getting teared up now thinking about you. You don't have a soul. You don't have a soul if you wasn't moved by that moment. If you weren't connected to these characters, like watching every iteration of this character and watching that movie and watching that moment happen, redemption, that he wasn't going to let that MJ die. He was not going to let that MJ fall to her death by no means. And he went and got her. Unfreaking believable. Unbelievable moment. But this is what makes this movie stand out more than anything. I don't think too many people talk about it, but they need to. Is the mere fact William Dafoe, who played this character, who played Norman Osborn in the first ever Spider-Man film with Tobey Maguire, that a lot of people make fun of. He was over the top. He was this, that, and the third. The suit was ridiculous and all this here. It was the early 2000s. But him being over the top, it was a comic book movie. Did we take comic book movies seriously back then? No. And neither did the actors. So give them some grace here. You want to talk about redemption. His portrayal as Green Goblin in No Way Home is top 5 MCU villain performances ever. Yes, I'm putting him up there with Thanos, Loki, Killmonger. He's up there with them in this movie. This was the Green Goblin that I know from the comics. This was the Green Goblin that was like the major foil of Peter Parker's Spider-Man in the comics. A beast. And William Dafoe was having the time of his life. You can tell that he just dove head first in on this performance. Bruh, what a villain. I mean, he gave Peter Parker everything he can handle. Think about it. Up to this point, Peter Parker that has took on, and we're talking about Tom Holland's Peter Parker here, has taken on the Vulture, has taken on Mysterio, has taken on Thanos. It has taken on Thanos' army. He had put up some fights. He had went to some battles, but none like this. None like this. And that was from Green Goblin. My God, what a villain. What a villain. I think that was probably the best part to me. Personally, yeah, it was great to see Doc Ock again. It was great to see Jamie Foxx return as Electro. They actually did Electro right this go around. All that was fine and good, but bruh, William Dafoe, bravo, man, freaking bro. And then to get to the end and realize that the only way to solve this problem is for everyone to forget him, Peter. The only way to get past this is so everybody could forget him. And for Peter to be left at the end of this movie completely alone was heartbreaking. It was one of the most devastating ends to a Spider-Man film I've ever seen. You know, even though he was victorious in a way, but he caused it. He caused all of this trauma. And the only way to solve it was to just reverse the spell. Just make it to where nobody remembers that he's that he's Spider-Man. And that includes losing the love of his life, losing his best friend. He already lost Aunt May, and he's just left alone. And all he has left is Spider-Man. This was such a powerful ending to this trilogy. I really, really am excited to see what is next. John Watts did a phenomenal job with these first 3 films. I'm excited to see what Dustin and Daniel Cretton do with Brand New Day, but hats off to John Watts for what he did with these three films, and to have it tell his own individual story through these three films within the confines of the MCU, still continuing their story along, but getting Peter Parker's story across through this trilogy was phenomenal work by him, by Tom Holland, by Kevin Feige, and everybody involved. I loved the Spider-Man trilogy so far, even though it's no longer a trilogy, because we're getting Brave New Day or Brand New Day. I'm thinking of Captain America, and please God, don't be like that. So I'm excited to see what's next in Tom Holland and what more he has to bring to the table to this character. It looks like we're getting a lot darker with his character in this new film. Can't wait to see what happens. But I want to know, what's your favorite Spider-Man movie so far, and who is your favorite Spider-Man? If it's not Tom Holland, is it Tobey Maguire? Is it Andrew Garfield? There's no wrong answers here. I'm not judging. I like everybody, but I really do enjoy Tom Holland in the role. I think he's perfect for this iteration of Spider-Man. But I would like to know, who is your favorite Spider-Man, and are you excited for Brand New Day? Are you excited to see these new characters? Or are you excited to see what this movie is about? Because they still haven't said. We don't know who the villain is. We still don't know who the villain of this new movie is. And I hope I don't find out. I hope it's kept a secret until I'm sitting in the theater and watching the movie. I love that. I love that. And so I would love to know your thoughts. Swing on over to the website, the kbradionetwork.com. Subscribe to the website. That way you can be informed of new episodes and past episodes that have dropped on this network. Also, don't forget about subscribing to YouTube and like this video don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to movie goodness here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me as we recap the MCU's version of Spider-Man, going over their first 3 films: Spider-Man No Way Home, Homecoming, Far From Home, and No Way Home. There's a lot of homes in there. But anyways, I want you all to know that I love you. Continue to love everyone. And until we speak again, you all be blessed.